Who lived where, whose land is ancestrally whose. For example, the whole of Kitale, the Luyas, the Kisis, many of the Kalenjin sub-tribes who are there today will have to move out because that land ancestrally belonged to the Pokot, the Cherangani, the Sengwer, and the Sabaot.
Oh, but that's a little extreme, Mheshimiwa.
It is not extreme, it is in the Constitution. I will challenge you to go and read it. That's it. The right to live everywhere and own property anywhere. I mean, really. I mean, let's be serious. 1,000 acres inhabited from people who were brought from Kiamba. And they came to Rift Valley with the same name, Kiamba. You find another place, people who came from Rurigi in Central Province. People are bound to fight. People are bound to fight.
Ethnic polarization is Ruto's biggest chess game for 2027. And if you are keen enough, he's doing it very strategically in different regions in Kenya. If you go to a part like Nyanza, you have Mbadi, who's the CS for Treasury, together with Opiyo Wandayi, telling Luos that the reason for their underdevelopment is because of Kikuyus. And the reason why they're not in government is because Kikuyus hate them. If you go to Somali, you have Honorable Adan Duale, telling the small communities of Northeastern and the Somali community that the reason why they've never been getting IDs for so long is because of Kikuyu's presidents like Uhuru, Mwai Kibaki, and Jomo Kenyatta. If you go to Coast, he has someone like Hassan Omar together with the Senate Speaker, Kindiki, telling the people in Coast that the reason why you people have not been getting title deeds is because of the Kikuyus. If you go to Masai land, he has Ledama Olekina, who's telling the people of Masai that the reason why you people have never fielded a presidential candidate is because of Kikuyus. In fact, the most audacious one is in Mount Kenya. Now that he realized he lost the majority of support and popular approval in that region, he has decided to even split that region with Mount Kenya East and Mount Kenya West. And you know, this concept of ethnic polarization is something that Ruto has not just done this year or has not just started with it earlier on. This is something that Wiliam Ruto has consistently done in his political career. But the most fundamental one that you need to look at was in 2007.
On one occasion, he had heard Wiliam Ruto address a crowd by saying that the time had come for the people in that area to show their true colors and do whatever necessary and available to make sure the madoa-doa are removed. The witness also confirmed to Mr. Steinberg that Wiliam Ruto was highly regarded by his people and that no one would go against his directions.
In fact, I keep telling people that in 2007, Raila did not win because he had a majority support from Kenyans. Raila won because of the high ethnic polarization against Kikuyus that was highly propagated by leaders like Wiliam Ruto. That they forged a very concerted effort to alienate one group and make other group of people to hate that one particular group. So people were not voting because Raila had a new agenda for the country. They were voting because they hated Kikuyus. And part of the people who propagated this narrative so bitterly against the Kikuyu was none other than Wiliam Ruto. That was the time that he started this ethnic polarization to divide this country.
The right to live everywhere and own property anywhere. I mean, really. I mean, let's be serious. 1,000 acres inhabited from people who were brought from Kiamba. And they came to Rift Valley with the same name, Kiamba. You find another place, people who came from Rurigi in Central Province. People are bound to fight. People are bound to fight.
If you look at 2007, Ruto was amongst the people who coined the phrase 41 versus 1. That 41 tribes of Kenyans in one particular election were going against one singular community. And that was the biggest agenda for that election. And for the people who think that Ruto was not a very radical ethnic polarizer in this country, go and look at the old videos of Ruto talking about the 2007 election. In one particular video, Ruto called the Kikuyu people madoadoa, that they are supposed to be removed from Eldoret because they do not belong there. They are staying in there. At another time, he called them weeds, that weeds are supposed to be uprooted. He likened them to weeds that are supposed to be uprooted from Eldoret. At another time, he called them a bird's nest, that the Kikuyu people in Eldoret are a bird's nest that needs to be removed. And there was one particular statement that I remember in 2007, where Ruto stood and told the Luos that we Kalenjins, we hate Kikuyus more than you. It is on record. Even a recent interview of one politician took note that Ruto made those kind of statements. So Ruto was one of the people in 2007 that led a concerted effort of ethnic polarization against one particular group of people. That people did not sit down to think about the agenda of a presidential candidate, but to think about how they are going to punish against one particular individual. And he's doing it again in 2027. That is why you are seeing that strategic effort in Nyanza, the Somali community, the coastal community, all these communities that have never had a chance to become president in Kenya. But you know, some of these things are very funny. Because take for example, like in 2007, Ruto would lead that ethnic polarization against the Kikuyu people. But in 2013 again, he goes ahead to work with the Kikuyu people, such that even the Kikuyus themselves forget that Ruto committed certain atrocities that led to the death of their own community. So you find out that this ethnic polarization is never about the people. It is always to just divide people for the own benefit of the politicians. But when you go on top, when it comes to government leadership, there is always an elite collaboration that knows nothing about tribes. Currently, let us keenly look at this ethnic polarization that is geared towards 2027, especially region by region. Let's go to Nyanza. The people who have been propagating this narrative in Nyanza are people like CS for Treasury John Mbadi. We have Opio Wandai, who's the CS for Energy. Then you have people like Aladwa, the Korogocho MCA, people like Robert Alai. All these people have been propagating this narrative of hate against the Kikuyus. But one particular person that you have to take note of is James Mbadi, because he has been given one of the most prestigious positions in the cabinet, the CS for Treasury. And in fact, one of the most disappointing things with John Mbadi is that you have one of the most prestigious and most impactful CS position, but the entire country knows you more for politicking and driving tribal narratives against the Kikuyu more than the work that you have done for the people.
I am happy that, Baba, you are going ahead of us without me betraying you. I was behind you. You are with me. You gave me positions of leadership when nobody imagined that I could lead. You made me the assistant minister in the office. You made me the longest serving chairman of your party when you were alive. You made me minority leader. You made me Minister of Finance, the first Luo to be a Minister for Finance in the Republic of Kenya.
In fact, it is so outrageous that you cannot even prove to the Nyanza people what is that one impactful project that you have done for them because of the fact that you were given that position as the CS for Treasury. But you're still driving the narrative to them that you are in government, but you cannot show them that I have built a dam for you. I have started a very big industry in Nyanza. I have pushed for certain policies. You cannot even show a single one. In fact, the entire country knows you as someone who's constantly shouting and bickering in funerals, talking about the hate against one community. If you critically analyze how the narrative is driven in Nyanza region, look at it. This is how they drive the narrative in Nyanza region. They talk of something that is called historical betrayal.
Igo wabunde tuoneno. Mara ino koni ya wawadi urudala. Ema koro handshake bire. Giwondo wanegidhimi wa 2022. Kagi 2022. Nyogi loko record wako sogi loko. Kusok Miriam. Mane kako uru nolo wa. Emu miana adagi uru. Adagi gachakwa okadwargi. Nikamanyu siep machielo.
If you listen to one of the clips that John Mbadi made while at a certain congregation, I believe in Luo Nyanza, he stated that You know, Kikuyus have always betrayed Luos for a very long time. And that is the reason why we should also take a chance to also punish them for that betrayal. So Gachagua, in fact, he made a statement that Gachagua claims Ruto betrayed Mount Kenya, but also Kikuyus betrayed us Luos since 1963. So there is a certain one narrative of historical betrayal that is being driven for the Nyanza people. Another way that narrative is being driven for the Nyanza people is electoral punishment and rage voting being urged for Luos. There is one particular address that is made by the same person, John Buddy. He is telling Luos that you are not supposed to be focusing on agenda. The only agenda that we have for 2027 is electoral punishment aimed at the Kikuyus. In fact, he tells it, the problem is that these things are in vernacular Luo language, so most people cannot really understand. He tells people that if we Luos are coming to vote out in 2027, we must come out in large numbers to express our anger and punish the Kikuyus. Another tactic of this narrative in Nyanza, they drive a narrative of exclusion from future power. This is now the narrative, how it's driven.
Karuto sitie komare 2027 nyaka 2032 oganda wa monagi benyaka wagol president mar Kenya.
Stating that by voting for Ruto in 2027, it can give them a chance to spearhead to have another candidate in 2032 who's not a Kalenjin or a Kikuyu. In fact, he made a public statement that we do not want to see a Kikuyu or a Kalenjin president in 2032. So there is also that narrative of exclusion from future power, whereby he's driving a narrative to the Luo people that you are the ones who are supposed to be taking power in 2032 and not these other tribes. So the only person who can make you take power in 2032 is Wiliam Ruto. So these are the three things that are driving the propagation of hate against Kikuyu people in Luo Nyanza. The historical betrayal, the electoral punishment, and the exclusion from power. You wonder, for somebody like James Buddy, that if you hate Kikuyu so much, that you want also Luos to believe that you hate Kikuyu so much, why is it that the people that you work with in your cabinet, in the CBK, at the Treasury Ministry, who are Kikuyus, why haven't you taken the initiative to fire them? Why is it that at the top you are collaborating with the Kikuyu leaders, but you go down at the grassroots in Nyanza telling them that Kikuyus are bad people and Kikuyus are not our friend, but you collaborate with them at the top of it all? It sounds so ridiculous. So that is why I'm telling you that it is always an elite collaboration at the top, but they have to divide people at the bottom because it always serves their political interest at the end of it all. Let us go to another region, the northeastern part, or the Somali community. There he has another person strategically placed there. And just like Mbadi, Honorable Duale has a very prestigious position. He is the CS for health. He also propagates the same narrative against the Kikuyus. And if you analyze it, these are the narrative that he propagates towards the Somali so that they can hate the Kikuyus. So he strategically talks about historical discrimination that has been there for a long time. Honorable Duale says that the reason why Kikuyus should not lead in Kenya is because they have prevented them from getting IDs for the last 60 or 50 years in Kenya. And in fact, he directly points out that it is because they were under Jomo Kenyatta, who was Kikuyu, Kibaki was Kikuyu, and Uhuru was Kikuyu. So all these Kikuyu presidents have prevented them from getting IDs. But you see, this historical discrimination is something that you question. What are you questioning about IDs? Do you want illegal immigrant Somalis to be getting IDs? Or do you want valid Kenyan Somalis to be getting IDs? Or Kenyans who have immigrated, or Somalis, who have immigrated to Kenya and they meet the requirements for them to get the IDs? Does it mean that arbitrarily everyone should be given an ID just because they're Somalis? So they propagate that historical discrimination. And they sell the narrative that the only person who can save them from this historical discrimination is Wiliam Ruto. That is why Wiliam Ruto, when he strategically goes to the northeastern part or the Somali community, the first thing that he will always talk about is the issuance of the ID. That for a long time, you people have not gotten a chance to get IDs. I will be the only one to get the IDs. And in fact, he does it so arbitrarily that they do not care about the security and the check process that is required by law or the background check. They've just decided to hand out IDs in those regions. So the moment the people in that region see that we have a president who is giving us IDs, then for the first time we are having a president who's considerate of the Somali community. But in the real sense, there is no tangible development that that president is bringing to that region. And at the same time, that person like Honorable Duale, whom you are defending so much, is not doing any fundamental for the people in Garissa or Mandera or Northeastern. So it is just to drive that narrative to make sure that in 2027, the Somali community votes against the Kikuyu for that particular reason of historical discrimination. But part of the narrative that has been driven that I've found so ridiculous is the demographic claim. I had one time that Honorable Dole claimed that Somalis are more populous than Kikuyus in Kenya. That the reason why Somalis, we have never known the accurate number of Somalis in Kenya is because they have been suppressed to get IDs, or for another reason, Somalis don't just exist in Kenya, they also exist in Somalia. So I was also wondering, does he intend that even Somalis in Somalia should also vote in Kenya just because they are Somalis? So he's saying that we are the most populous people and we should get to decide who should become the president. So that is why he's telling Somalis that this is the time for you to rally behind Wiliam Ruto and getting the most amount of votes. They even talked about more than 3 million votes from the Somali community, and we are wondering, where does it come from? So we have to use that opportunity to prove the point that we have the demographic advantage more than the Kikuyus who have been seen to enjoy it for such a long time. But the thing that gained controversy the most last week was the hyena metaphor.
Kikuyda waxay dhaheen annaka moogi Kenya nin kale noolaan maro. Waxay noqdeen waraabihii la tagista bartay ka rigista waaxa. Waa ku dhib Soomo. Nimanka waraabay noqdeen waraaba. Waxay dhaheen Kenya annaka iskala nin kale ku noolaan maro. Moose rutaan kale kuma noolaanayo. Nimanka jalwada waxa lagu xidhay koona mucaarad ahaayeen.
And Duale came out to apologize and say that it was just a proverb and he did not mean to intend that Kikuyus are hyenas. We all know that that was not just a proverb. It was a very direct statement towards the Kikuyus. He said that the Kikuyus are hyenas and they eat everything and they should be hunted. In fact, the most dangerous part was him saying that they should be hunted. Because if you remember, just like I stated in 2007, when Ruto also stated that Kikuyus are like a bird's nest, that they need to be removed and uprooted in Eldoret. So what Honorable Duale is also propagating the same thing with the Somali community, telling people that these are hyenas and whenever you see them in our region, they need to be hunted. That is why it was forced by the NCIC to actually launch investigation and respond to the statements of Honorable Duale. And most of the Kikuyu leaders were very enraged to that statement. So you can see the hate that he is driving in that particular region to get the Somalis to vote for Wiliam Ruto in 2027 through that ethnic polarization chess game that Wiliam Ruto is trying to play so much. But you go to another region like Coast, and you'll find Hassan Omar. And just like Honorable Duale, Hassan Omar has been on the media for his remarks against the Kikuyus.
Lakini kwa sasa adui wetu yule hatupendi, yule ataka kuturegesha nyuma, yule fisadi, yule aliyetangulia kama rais wa jamhuri hii, yule anafadhili upinzani, yule aliweka vikaragosi, yule hakuwa na azma ya Raila, yule hakuwa na azma ya sisi kuendelea mbele, yule aliyotusaliti, yule na watu wake tutawaweka katika kaburi la sahau ili waende huko mbele watokomee na sisi tuweze kuhakikisha tumeendelea na William Samoei Ruto. Kwa hayo mengi, wacha tuone two term.
And it was not a long time ago, it was just about 2 months ago. In fact, Hassan Omar, I believe one time stated that Kikuyus are thieves and Kikuyus should not be given an opportunity to lead in this country. So at the course where he has positioned Hassan Omar and Kingi, they drive a narrative of coastal historical land injustices. That the reason why the people in the coastal region have never been able to get IDs is because of the Kikuyu presidents for all this time.
Mr. President, you have made us dignified. You have returned our citizenship rights. Sisi leo tunamiliki kitambulisho na tukapata haki zote nyingine za kitaifa. Haiwezekani kamwe sisi tukarudi nyuma. Wazungu wanasema forward ever, backward never.
In fact, one of the things that I hear Hassan Omar talk about so passionately is that where did Uhuru get the title deed for all those vast amount of land that he has in the coastal region? But then it is ridiculous because you need to ask him, does he also know that Wiliam Ruto has hundreds of thousands of hectares of land in the same coastal region which he obtained while he was in power with Uhuru Kenyatta?
Wale walioiba mashamba kwingine, wale waliofanya wanyamapori wakawa bora kuliko binadamu Voi na Taita Taveta, wale waliotuchukulia mashamba Kwale, wale walitukulia mashamba huku katika maeneo ya pwani yote, na waambia mkuwe tayari kuregesha nazi, wenye nazi sasa wako tayari kuja kuzinyakua.
So if Hassan Omar is going to be questioning about the land that is there in the coastal region, why doesn't he also question Wiliam Ruto how he was able to gain a vast amount of land in the coastal region? And if you go to those farms, you'll also still find squatters living there. So in coastal region, Hassan Omar and Kingi are now propagating that hate with these little small coastal communities, that the only solution for you to guys to always get, you know, historical land justice from Kenya is by you voting for Wiliam Ruto. The most audacious form of ethnic polarization that Ruto has done is the one in Mount Kenya. Because for us, for a long time, we never thought that there is Mount Kenya East and Mount Kenya West. So now that Ruto has realized that he can also propagate hate against the Kikuyu with these other small communities, or these communities that have never taken leadership in the country, like the Luos, the coastal region, or the northern part, he has realized that now he has to defragment now the communities that are very close to the Kikuyus. I'm talking about the Meru communities, the Embu communities, the Ambere communities, all these communities that are considered part of Mount Kenya. So that is now why we are hearing about a certain ethnic polarization now at Mount Kenya, not just in other regions. So now Ruto wants to propagate hate against the Kikuyus from communities that have supported the Kikuyus for a very long time. So we are having Mount Kenya West. So if you look at that list, Mount Kenya West is being termed as Kiambu, Murang'a, Nyeri, and parts of Nyandarua and Nakuru. And Mount Kenya East is now being termed as part of Meru, Embu, Tharaka Nithi, and some parts of Kirinyaga because they border Embu quite so closely, especially in the regions of Mwea. So they claim that these two regions are very distinct and they need to be separated. So the reason why Ruto is separating it is because he strategically made something when he fired Gachagua, or he made a concerted effort to make sure that he's impeached. He made sure that Kindiki was going to be the next deputy president so that he can further that ethnic polarization and give the people of Mount Kenya East a reason for them to revolt against the dominant Kikuyu tribes or Kikuyu region of the Mount Kenya West. So the people in Mount Kenya East, the Merus, the Embus, together with parts of Kirinyaga and also Tharaka Nithi, they also now believe that the reason why they have never also been able to get into power is because they have been supporting the Kikuyus. Look at the people who are propagating this division of Mount Kenya so passionately. The person who's doing it right now, and the problem is that all this ethnic polarization is being done by most of this CS. So the person who's also doing the ethnic polarization in Mount Kenya is now the CS for Public Service, Geoffrey Ruku. And he's been doing all rounds on media and mainstream stations talking about the division and the possibility of even having beacons to separate Mount Kenya West and Mount Kenya East. So the narrative that is being driven to the people of Mount Kenya East is that the Kikuyu people have always treated you as juniors. That there is no single time they have ever allowed you to be able to take power in this country by either being a president or a deputy president. So they go to the people in Mount Kenya East, they go to Embu, they go to Tharaka, they go to Meru, and they tell them that Ruto is the first president to elect or appoint a deputy president from the Mount Kenya East. And then they drive the false narrative that the dominant Kikuyu region, the Mount Kenya West of Kiambu and Nyeri, are only revolting against President Ruto because he appointed Professor Kithure Kindiki, who's from Mount Kenya East, that they have now created. So they drive that narrative of being mistreated as juniors by the Kikuyu dominant Mount Kenya West, so that it can give them a good reason to vote for Wiliam Ruto in 2027. If you listen to how the narrative of Mount Kenya East and Mount Kenya West is being propagated, Ruto has given a task to the CS for Public Service, Joseph Ruku, together with Professor Kithure Kindiki, that these people have to deliver 2 million votes or 1.5 million votes from the Mount Kenya East. In fact, these people have sat down with Wiliam Ruto in status and they have assured Ruto that we are going to take the mandate and the task to make sure that we get over 1.5 million people from Mount Kenya East to vote for you in 2027. So we are talking about Professor Kithure Kindiki, who publicly said that he's going to teach Gachagua a lesson in Olkalau, that he's going to bring the victory for Wiliam Ruto in Olkalau, but failed so embarrassingly in that region. He's now talking about getting 1.5 million votes for Wiliam Ruto by separating Mount Kenya and getting those votes from Mount Kenya East. That will be a very big embarrassment for him in 2027. And Wiliam Ruto has noticed the pattern. He has seen that Kindiki might not be as helpful as he might have thought in 2027. That is why we are having the recent case of Kindiki being stripped of certain powers, like the council that was mandated for budgeting together with the policy of the county government. He no longer has certain duties that have been stripped away from him and he has been given to Mudavadi. So some people say that it is because he has so many duties and he has to be relieved of some. But that is not the particular reason. There is a looming fallout between Kindiki and Wiliam Ruto right now, because Wiliam Ruto has seen that even that narrative of dividing Mount Kenya cannot actually work. Because it is funny, you tell someone that Kindiki will amass over 1.5 million people to vote for Wiliam Ruto. It is not possible. Because you yourself as a deputy president, there is nothing for you to also show for the people of Embu or Tharaka Nithi. Go to Mount Kenya East, as they purport to call it. Name for me one fundamental project through his position, Professor Kithure Kindiki has been able to do. Has he constructed a dam? Has he constructed a new big industry for the utilization of macadamia in Mount Kenya East? What is that fundamental thing that people can applaud him and praise him for? There is nothing. And that is why you cannot even force the people from your own region to vote for Wiliam Ruto. It's because you also have nothing to show for them for the position that you brag so much about. That is why one of the regions that we have seen has a lot of disapproval for Wiliam Ruto is Mount Kenya East. We had the biggest protests in Embu, more than any other region in Kenya today. In Meru, the same. Nobody wants to vote for Wiliam Ruto. They applaud the fact that, yes, for the first time at least, we've had a deputy president who's from Mount Kenya East or who's a Meru. But at the same time, they're saying that we will celebrate you, but we will not vote for Wiliam Ruto. It becomes very difficult to have that fact with them. So even Kithure Kindiki cannot convince his own people to vote for Wiliam Ruto. And Wiliam Ruto has sensed it and he has started looming that division between them so that he can get a more formidable candidate from Mount Kenya so that he can replace Kithure Kindiki. And it is quite certain for every analyst to show you that if Wiliam Ruto is going to carry on with Kindiki in 2027, it is going to be a fatal strategic mistake for him. So he has to plan early to get another new person. And somebody like Rigathi Gachagua saw these things from a mile away. You read the headlines a few days ago when Rigathi Gachagua was talking about he should stop harassing Kithure Kindiki. So Rigathi Gachagua is even now trying to sympathize with Kithure Kindiki, trying to tell him that I have been through this situation that you are in right now, and I fully understand, and I don't want people to attack you. That you are being used just the same way that I was used in 2023 and I was impeached. And sometimes we wonder, where does Gachagua get all this intel to unravel most of the political things in Kenya before they even happen? He talked about some time back that Kithure Kindiki is being harassed in government and there's a plan to actually oust him or not appoint him as a deputy presidential candidate for Wiliam Ruto in 2027. So he had already foreseen this. But this plan to divide Mount Kenya West into Mount Kenya East is something that cannot actually work. It is a very difficult strategic position, because for a very long time, Mount Kenya has always been a monolithic region whereby they voted majority for just one particular candidate. This ethnic polarization is what Wiliam Ruto is looking forward to in 2027. And just like I've listed, he's trying to propagate a division between the Luyos and the Kikuyus, the coastal people and the Kikuyus, the northeastern parts and the Kikuyus, the Mount Kenya east of Embu Meru against the Kikuyus, the Masai against the Kikuyus. So that in 2027, we only focus on the agenda of punishing one particular tribe, and we don't focus on a common interest as Kenyans to question his over expenditure, his corruption, his debt trap that is getting to Kenyans. That is his biggest chess game for 2027. That is why consistently, as we see his leaders profiling one particular community, it is a strategic move that they're doing it very deliberately so that this ethnic polarization can continue on. And if you go to a region like Luo, it has worked so well. I am a Luo. If you go to talk to the Luos today, most of them are telling you about being in broad-based. But you tell them, what is the reason why you should be voting for Wiliam Ruto? It is because they hate Gachagua. In fact, that is the major reason that they will tell you why they're seeking to vote for Wiliam Ruto. They will tell you that we are going to punish the Kikuyus because they had also elected Ruto, or we are going to punish the Kikuyus because of these historical injustices that they have never allowed us to become president. So nobody's focusing on what has even Wiliam Ruto done for the Luo community. They're only focusing on punishing the Kikuyus. And I'm very, very sad for my own community because we are being used. Because at the end of the day, we know that there is no tangible development that Wiliam Ruto is bringing to the Luo nation. There is no tangible development. The people who claim to have joined government like Honorable Mbadi and CS Opiyo and I are bringing to the Luo nation. If you go right now to Ugunja or Siaya County, people are complaining about the lack of electricity. Nobody has electricity there, but they have a CS who's for energy, who's supposed to be helping them with the connectivity. So we Luos are being used such that it is so disastrous that for the first time, one of the biggest party, in fact, the long-standing biggest party in Kenya, ODM, is so comfortable and convinced that they will not field a presidential candidate, they will not field a deputy presidential candidate just because they have to punish the Kikuyus or they have to align with Ruto so that they do not side with the Kikuyu people. So Luos are also one of the hugest tribes which are being used for this ethnic polarization. And the reason for that is because Luos have always been the drama, the vigor of Kenyan politics. They have always hold the voice when it comes to Kenyan politics. So this one particular tribe, Ruto, is very critical to make sure that that narrative of hate sticks with them, that they vote for him not for the sole purpose of agenda, but for the sole purpose of punishing Kikuyus. So this is the trick of Wiliam Ruto, and we must not allow him to win for this. In fact, one of the things that I've proposed for this ethnic polarization not to happen, specifically in Mount Kenya, is for Gachagua not to vie in 2027. Because the moment Gachagua vies in 2027, then you give Wiliam Ruto the best possible reason to propagate this Luo Kikuyu hate ethnic polarization in Nyanza. Because the moment you have Gachagua there, and the indoctrination and the narrative and the rhetoric that Ruto has run together with Mbadi in Nyanza, and they see that Gachagua is vying for this particular position, then you'll be giving them a reason that this is the reason why you should not be voting for the Kikuyu community, because Gachagua is there. And the reason why it is so difficult for that is because also, I would love to admit that Gachagua has openly been very critical or made his sentiments about not liking to align with the Luo people or ODM as a party itself. So the moment Gachagua is given that opportunity to vie, then you give Wiliam Ruto what he wants. You give the Luo people a reason now to vote against any other side and to support Wiliam Ruto in order to punish Gachagua, who for them, for a very long time, has made insults and very bad statements against their kingpin leader, the late Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga. So if Gachagua wants to actually take Ruto out of power, he must not vie for the presidency in 2027. He must sit this one out, build a formidable party, have MPs, governors, and gain the control of Mount Kenya, but support a new candidate for the 2027. So that is the sphere that we are having when it comes to this ethnic polarization. And we will keep analyzing it and see how it's shifting. And the reason why it is very difficult for it to go on is because Kenyans have started to grow out of this ethnic tribal politics. That is why a candidate like Honorable Sifuna is a very dangerous candidate for Wiliam Ruto. Because Sifuna is the only presidential candidate who's revered and seen as Sifuna by himself as a presidential candidate. He is not seen as someone from a particular block to bring certain votes. The moment right now you hear of Fred Matiang'i, the first thing that analysts talk about is the Kisii vote. If it's Kalonzo, it is the Kamba vote. If it is Gachagua, it is the Kikuyu vote. But when it is Sifuna, we don't talk about the Luya vote. So he's the only presidential candidate that can be revered and seen just by himself, by his own principles, by his own character, by his own confidence, to be loved by Kenyans. So he's one of the most dangerous candidates for Wiliam Ruto because it does not allow him to propagate that ethnic polarization. Because the moment you uplift someone like Gachagua, it is easier for him to polarize polarize Luos against the Kikuyus. But the moment you have someone like Sifuna, who's revered by the entire country, it is difficult to divide these people because these people love him for that one particular person. And I love the fact that when Sifuna went on to Bungoma, he said that he was going to visit Bungoma just like any other place. He was not going to do a coronation. He was not going to do any homecoming. He was going to visit Kenyans. And that is a very good message, because you must never give this government apologists a chance to drive you back into the discussion of tribal block voting. They should not drag Sifuna into stating that Sifuna is now representing the Luya nation for the first time or is unifying the Luya nation. That is not his agenda. His agenda is to unify the people of Kenya. That is the most important thing. So let us keep analyzing this ethnic polarization as we keep up the speed and see what political topics we'll be discussing on this new channel of ours. But it has been a great discussion, and I want to keep on doing this. So you guys subscribe to the channel, give me your comments and sentiments, because I read every comment and I reply to every comment. So tell me your sentiments. It has been Adrian Oluwach, such a nice episode. Let's keep growing. Love you so much.